one of the things that Bell Hook talked about was how, when black women were allowed to go to school and black men were literally held back, right? They were kept out of education. They were not allowed to go to school, which is so crazy. Like when we sit and think about why our black people, and you talk about the relational discourse and everything that's really took off within the last like few years with the manosphere and so forth, and just why black people are not on one accord, and why our business is out in the streets and there's so much relational discourse. When you think about just like that history of like black men literally being denied jobs, black men literally being denied, opportunities to go to school, like it's really crazy. You know what I mean? And so it's like when you step back and I think about this, right? So what I was saying about Bell Hooks, she just talked about how, as black people, we really have to stop weaponizing intelligence. We have to stop weaponizing it against one another. We have to stop saying you're so stupid, you're so this, for whatever reason, right? Like I know for some YouTubers, and we know that people are, everyone's like, people are not as resourceful, and I put the link in the bio, and why are you asking me? And I'm not necessarily justifying like able-bodied adults, but I think even still, what that clearly indicates is the dumbing down and the water like of society, right? Like I feel like where we are today, we're not really in a good space, right? Like there have been calculated efforts that have gone above and beyond to dilute history, that have been gone above and beyond to really kind of make this like a more perfect and peaceful world by just ridding us of our ability to think critically and ridding us of our ability to read. At this point, like I think I talked about on here how books prices were increasing. Like so many efforts have been put in place strategically, right? Like I talked to you guys about the only black owned bookstore in my city who was literally shut down due to lack of funding. They went up on the rent, they went up on the taxes or whatever for the storefront. But at the same time, they went and put like an Asian bookstore, like literally a few doors down. And, I remember before she was getting ready to close, she was just telling me like, this is what they do. You know what I mean? Like, this is literally what they do. Like they'll see that this is the only black owned bookstore on this street, and they'll come and they'll put another, store. And it just was like, it's so mind blowing. And so today I wrote about activism, right? Like why be an activism in a white world? And I know that sounds like, like obviously we know the work is so important, but I really want to kind of hone in on what happened with Claudine Gay, right? It was just, let me see, it was Missouri's, let me get the name because I have a newsletter that was just sent out to me about this, and I just want to get the name right. But while I'm going ahead and pulling this up, I'm just sitting here thinking about, I was thinking about Colin Kaepernick, right? And him writing out that letter to the New York Jets to join their practice team, and just all the ways in which black people are really snuffed from economic opportunities from being in a space of activism. And I think as much as we kind of don't want to talk about that because that's like a really big thing, like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's something that's almost swept under the rug. But here's the thing, right? So at one point it was assassination, right? We clearly seen it with Martin Luther King. He was literally assassinated for advocating on behalf of black people and fighting for our civil rights. But we fast forward and nobody's being snuffed out, right? Nobody's being assassinated. But, well, in this case, hang on. So yeah, it was Lincoln University. Let me see, calls for president termination. Dr. Bonnie Bailey. Yeah. Bonner Bailey. She was at the University, Missouri. She died of suicide by experiencing bullying and severe mistreatment. This is from, I really like his newsletter. This is from Phil's newsletter. So from my own personal experience, right? Like over the summer, I've worked with in community centers, and I've worked with little black boys and girls. And, we were going over a lecture by Dr. Kunjufu. It talked about, just the black peer group. You guys know I love that work. It's something that I always reference. And I just realized like how much more there is to learn in that. But while I was working at the community center and I was playing this lecture of this black teacher, right, this black professor, and the community center like head, I don't even know what you want to call her, maybe like the head of the community center or whatever, she comes in and they're like peeking in the classroom and they're like, what is that? You know what I mean? It's like everyone is kind of like so taboo. And I remember when I went to go pick up my pay, because I was paid over the summer for working with them. she was so rude to me. She was like, you can go wait in the hall. Like, it was something that was so nasty. And there was another black girl that was there as well. And like, I feel like this is what alarms me about black advocacy, right? Is that, and this is all following up with my column, because I just feel like the column needed a little bit more context. So I just kind of wanted to go in on talk about this. But this is something that really alarms me about the work of black advocacy, right? Like, it really, like, black activists do not have community outside of black people. Like, they do not have community. They don't have any, like, when I think about Colin Kaepernick, and it's not to say Colin is, you know, financially in distress or whatever the case may be, but that man literally lost his job. You know what I mean? Like, he literally lost out on his way to make money. And I'm not saying that he's not entrepreneurial, and I'm not saying, you know what I mean? We don't really know. But to me, I felt like with Colin reaching out to, you know, the New York Jets to work with them in their practicing, like, I think that was pretty telling. And, you know, I just think about like Dr. Umar. He's another example, right? Like, I feel like how Dr. Umar has had to really lean into more surface level type of conversation as it relates to like black people in like our community, and just trying to get his outreach for, you know, his school and all these different things that he's trying to build. Like, I just think about how much black activists give up to advocate on behalf of black people, and how it really is lost on us so many times, you know. And I don't think that anyone's really to fault here. Like, I just really feel like when I think about where we are today in the state of today's economy, when I think about single parenthood, when I think about like the whole nine, like, it's really hard to just simply focus on your studies. And this kind of goes back to conversations about college, right? It being something in which it's such a privilege to be able to go to college and simply focus on college and study. And you know what I mean? Just stay focused on your studies. Like, that's a privilege. Not many people have that privilege. You know, I was even thinking about in terms of like having a dream and being creative and pursuing all these different things. You have so many people who are so gifted, you know, but they don't have qualifications on paper. Vivian Thompson comes to mind when I think about this, right? Like, he was literally the first black doctor, right? I don't even want to say black doctor. He was literally the first man to develop the cardiovascular cure, right, for blue babies, supposedly. So it was because of his surgical procedures and his studies and his research that we now have cardiovascular surgeries. And his I don't want to say notoriety, but his recognition was really lost on John Hopkins and so forth, because he wasn't even a resident. Like, he was like working under, I cannot think of that white man's name, but he was working under him at John Hopkins. And because he couldn't go to school and get the qualifications because he didn't have the money, right, the banks literally closed. And when the banks closed, they took all of his money, right? And I think about how common is this story, right? Like, when you look back past tense, like when you look at the story, like I'm talking about in the movie Something That the Lord Did, and we know that films can easily be fabricated, but essentially with Vivian Thompson, it's like he literally saved money to go to school, but at the time the banks literally just closed. They gave no explanation, like they just completely closed. And we know that black people are owed trillions of dollars in this country, and how I cannot think of the name of that bank, but it was like a bank that was open, I don't want to say Federal Reserves or something like that, and it literally just closed. They took all of black people's money. We never got it back. We didn't hear nothing else about it. They pretty much told us to go on about our business and kick rocks. Like, and I think the thing about this too is, even if you don't have context, like even if you don't have the contents, even if you maybe don't have the notes, you still have a level of awareness. And so I just think that I don't want to be like, it's time for black people to come together, but I do think that it is time for us to kind of sit and like really take a clear, like get a clear understanding of what is going on here. Because one thing that has remained super constant and is so evident to me is that there is a concerted amount of effort going into the erasure of our history. Like, so many people are taking our stories. I just seen this white woman, she wrote a column talking about how she doesn't really care about cultural appropriation. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's a sign of admiration. And this is what happens when like it just gets a little too out of line. But when I tell you, man, like, this is another thing I kind of wanted to bring on. Like, I have so much grievance of growing up in Ohio. You know, I really do, because I feel like I was what was I doing? I was watching this movie, and it was based in DC. And I just have so much grievance, you know, from not growing up in the South, and growing up where there's like a rich culture of African Americans, right? Like not growing up in Chicago, but growing up in Ohio that is like super Republican, super conservative. Like I have so much grievance of that. There's absolutely no culture. You know what I mean? There's no culture. Like our culture is complete. Like I grew up where it was like, I remember I would go to work and I would have nails on, right? Like just being a black girl minding my business. And I remember my colleagues, white people would look at me so crazy. Like I think about the low key, like little T trauma that I went through just from my own personal experiences in developing professionally. You know what I mean? Like the bullying. It's been so many times I've been wrongfully terminated. It's been so many times I went to HR and they've done absolutely nothing. They're like, oh, that doesn't mean that it's racism. Even when I'm telling them like, listen, she was referencing Tupac doing all this crazy stuff in the classroom. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's always lost them. Like they don't, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it's so real. And it's like, I think what's so crazy is, you know, you could talk about science, you could talk about natural evolution, you could talk about all these different things, but I just feel like the concerted amount of effort that is going into the glorification of interracial relationships is also very alarming. And like I said, I just think my biggest concern in all of this is, where do we stand? And I told y'all, like for me personally, I think anytime you have to divorce yourself to enter into a space, that's not your space, you know? And I think what sucks for so many people, and I think what sucks for so many African Americans, is that to really stand in this space and be really proud of your blackness is like a really hard thing to do. And I think you absolutely sacrifice a lot to be in that space. And, you know, sometimes that sacrifice comes on, you know, people who don't care to remember your work. And it's not really a matter of crab in a barrel or I hate you or anything like that. It's just like, man, the lack of education is so deeply embedded in our psyche. Like, you know what I mean? Like that deprivation. And then, like I mentioned prior, I kind of skipped over it, but going back to what I was saying about like just having to work, you know what I mean? Like black people being the laborers, being the most economically deprived. Well, I mean, I'll say the most, like, you know, this is, we ain't gonna say the most, but no, we're definitely up in there, you know what I mean? But just being so economically deprived as African Americans, you know, we're never really given that freedom, you know. And I just seen a podcast. I'm actually going to stream it. There was this, it's like a business and finance podcast. There was a woman talking about how Kylie Jenner had generated about 14 million tax-free dollars for her daughter. And it's like, it's just so crazy. Like, it's really true. Like the rich absolutely get richer. And I was thinking like, man, like, why is it that the rich get richer? And it really is because they hoard wealth. They hoard the money. You know what I mean? Like, that's literally what it is. I used to think like, oh, it's a mindset. Once you make this certain amount of money, you can da 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 da. And it's not the same. Like, you think about a lot of pro athletes and a lot of people are like, oh, NFL players go broke and things like that. And it's like, yeah, because they're like helping people in their family. You know what I mean? And then it's just like, we're not getting the tax breaks. We don't have the gatekeepers coming in telling us, oh, okay, I'm gonna break you off for this, right? Oh, I'm gonna sign you for the highest contract. You know what I mean? And you're out all season. Like, come on, bro. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there's so much to unpack. And I just feel like even just like thinking about it and even taking that first step, it's like, wow. Because it's like when you really sit and think about it, black people, we have been deprived of our history. Like, it's something we literally have to go out and find. And don't get me wrong, we've all been lied to. Like, I definitely think that like educational systems has failed all of us. But it's like when you talk about African American history, it is something that is so far gone. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that is so far gone. Like, we have to really go above and beyond to seek it, you know, and to cultivate that. And even still, the work is never done, you know? So it's like, man, it's crazy. I do my best to like really try to prioritize, you know, reading African American studies, but it's heavy. It's so heavy, man. It's like, and then I think that's my thing too about saying growing up, you know, in a conservative town, in a conservative city, and just kind of being born and raised in that. It's like, you just have so much grief because I just think, again, it's like there's that sense of loneliness. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have this collective understanding. You don't have black people backing you. You don't have your culture backing you. Like, okay, hold up, we ain't gonna do that. You know what I mean? Or, okay, hold up, let's, you know what I mean? That's not a thing. So it's like you're really kind of at a one-to-one type of scenario. And I think for a lot of black people who grow up, you know, in conservative towns and, you know, so forth, they have that same feeling, you know, that deprivation. And for so many of us, we're almost like forced into, you know, interracial relationships and integration that it's not really by a will of our own, but just a lack of opportunity, a lack of a community. And so I think that that's literally what the work of, I think in order for the work of activism to thrive today, it's going to take collective effort. It's going to take conscious effort. It's going to take community.